Where's Lady Macbeth been all this time? She's been out of the play for an entire act. Here she is. But what's going on? She's walking, but she's asleep. She's sleepwalking. And what's she doing with her hand? She's rubbing a spot of blood. She can't get rid of it. She's traumatised. And she reveals the crimes that her and her husband have committed to people who are watching her. That's what happens in the famous Act 5, Scene 1 of Macbeth. Like this video, subscribe to the channel and click on the link in the notes below to access the platform where you can do an AI tutor activity that will question you to test your understanding of what's been discussed in this video. It's a brilliant way to learn. Act 5 Scene 1 is another one of those fantastic Shakespeare scenes that is completely unforgettable, and it's one of the scenes that makes Macbeth the play that it is. Everybody remembers the sleepwalking scene with Lady Macbeth finally going mad. Now it's kind of a parallel scene to the moment in Act 3 Scene 4 when Macbeth lost it at his banquet. He thought he saw the ghost of Banquo. It was a public meltdown. And here too, Lady Macbeth has a public meltdown. The gentlewoman who attends Lady Macbeth has called the doctor in because she's worried and has heard things she shouldn't have heard coming from Lady Macbeth's mouth, because Lady Macbeth has been sleepwalking for a number of nights in a row. And in this scene, Lady Macbeth reveals to the public, represented by these two other characters, the gentlewoman and the doctor, all their crimes. So there's that parallel between Macbeth's meltdown and hers. They both take place in public. They're not able to hold it together throughout the play. So this completes the narrative arc for both characters. They commit crimes, they attempt to hide them, but ultimately, those crimes can't be suppressed. This scene is quite different from Macbeth's public meltdown in one particularly noticeable way, which is that here Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking. Macbeth was awake, he hallucinated Banquo's ghost. Lady Macbeth, she's asleep when she hallucinates spots of blood on her hand. Now, why has Shakespeare done that, have her get up and walk around in her sleep? Well, we've talked in many of the videos for this series about the importance of sleep as a motif in the play Macbeth. Sleep symbolises innocence and purity. Lady Macbeth is a deeply evil and disturbed character. It is no surprise that she is not able to sleep. That symbolises the fact that she's not pure, she's not innocent. So it makes perfect sense for her to be up and walking around in the darkness. Her soul is not at rest. But also, there's something that I find particularly appropriate about Lady Macbeth sleepwalking when she gives away the crimes. And that is that when she's awake, Lady Macbeth, all the way through the play, has been able to hold it together. She's been a great figure of solidity and strength in public. So it kind of makes sense that she only falls apart when she's asleep. It's a shame Sigmund Freud wasn't around at the time that Shakespeare was writing Macbeth, because I'm sure he would have had a lot to say about this. Let's look at it as a Freudian interpretation might look at it. So you know about Freud and the idea of the ego and the id. The ego is the conscious thinking mind. The id is the suppressed fears and desires which try to surface and which the ego pushes down. And Freud really believed that the id would surface in people's dreams. And it makes complete sense here if we think in Freudian terms that Lady Macbeth's repressed fears should surface at the time when she can't control them, in the night time when she's supposed to be asleep. So it's like her id coming to the surface. So there are two reasons for this to be a sleepwalking scene. First, because it links to this idea of sleep as a motif of purity and innocence. And secondly, because it's the time when the suppressed part of Lady Macbeth's consciousness can surface. It is significant that she carries a candle with her. Now, candles have all kinds of different possible interpretations, but here it seems to mean that she's looking for some kind of light in the darkness. She's been consumed by darkness. We're told by the gentlewoman that she has light by her continually, 'tis her command. So Lady Macbeth always wants a light beside her. If we think about the biblical significance of a candle, and particularly that phrase from the Bible, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not overcome it, we can interpret this light of the candle as some kind of desire to reconnect with God, which would make sense for someone who's been so dark and so evil. And of course, light also in a kind of spiritual way signifies hope for better things, doesn't it? There's also a way in which this image of the candle links to something Macbeth says in one of his most important speeches in the play, which is coming up later in scene 5, when he talks about life as a brief candle. Now, if we think of that metaphor, life as a brief candle, then we can see the flame of the candle as the kind of image of life itself, small, flickering, fragile, and could be snuffed out at any moment. And that's how it seems to be with Lady Macbeth. She's become quite fragile and falling apart and could be snuffed out at any moment. So there's all those significances to the candle as a symbol. The other incredibly important symbolic thing about this scene is this washing of the blood from the hands. It's very, very famous. And it parallels what Macbeth was doing in Act 2, Scene 2. When he looked at his hands, they actually had blood on them, and he wanted to get rid of the blood. Lady Macbeth, she has managed to think she hasn't had a problem, she hasn't felt guilty throughout the entire play, but here at the end, in her subconscious mind, this blood is there and she hallucinates it on her hand. And clearly, just as it did for Macbeth, this blood signifies her guilt, and the desire to wash it out and the incessant rubbing at it is this desire to get rid of the feeling of guilt. And of course, she can't. It's there and it won't go away, and she's frantically trying to get rid of it. So that symbolises the guilt and the inability to get over it. Famously, she says,
"Out, damn spot, out, I say."
Now, that's very interesting, the way she's calling the spot damned or cursed or disconnected from God, when obviously it's she who's the one who feels disconnected from God. And this seems to be a form of projection, which is something that we talked about with Macbeth earlier in the play. She is projecting onto the spot her own feelings of damnation. In technical literary terms, you can call the adjective damned there a transferred epithet. Now, transferred epithet is when a writer uses an adjective that should really be applied to another character and puts that adjective instead with an inanimate object. So she feels damned, but she calls the spot damned. It's a transferred epithet. It represents her projection of her feelings of damnation onto an external object. The rest of what Lady Macbeth talks about is completely incoherent and fragmented for the doctor and the gentlewoman, although they are able to discern that she seems to be talking about people who have died and that she's been involved in the murder of, because they say,
"You have known what you should not."
"She has spoke what she should not. I'm sure of that. Heaven knows what she has known."
Interestingly, the doctor and the gentlewoman look to God, look to heaven to know what she has known, but they can work out that she's been involved in some dark crimes. So this really is the public revelation of the crimes. To the audience, what she says is fragmented, but it's not incoherent. If we listen carefully to her words, she's clearly recalling in her mind various scenes from throughout the play. Things that were said by her, things that were said by Macbeth, and even thoughts that she and perhaps even Macbeth have had that we didn't hear them verbalise earlier in the play.
"Hell is murky. Fie, my lord, fie. A soldier and afeard. What need we fear who knows it, when none can call our power to account? Yet who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him? The Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? What, will these hands ne'er be clean? No more of that, my lord, no more of that. You mar all with this starting."
We recognise all of these ideas from earlier in the play, don't we? So, for example, there's the bit where she's telling off her husband. A soldier and afeard, what need we fear? That's her chiding Macbeth. But then immediately after that, she goes into, yet who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him? Now, who said that? Neither of them said that, but she probably thought it when she went and saw Duncan. And she didn't express that at the time. She came back, she was strong, she was powerful. But now these subconscious thoughts arise. Then after that, she starts talking about how the Thane of Fife had a wife. Now, the Thane of Fife, that's Macduff. Lady Macbeth hasn't been in the play since Act 3 when Macbeth was talking about having Banquo murdered. In principle, she doesn't have any idea about the murder of Macduff's family, but she seems to know it somehow, or perhaps intuit it. And that is something that is often found in Shakespeare's mad characters. They seem to know by some kind of cosmic connectedness about events that have happened that, when we think logically, they shouldn't actually know about. So her kind of imaginings of the Thane of Fife's wife coming to her mind suggests to us that she's connected with events that she didn't know about, and that that's all a part of her going mad. Then she goes to, "No more of that, my lord, no more." So she's chiding her husband again. She's really jumping back and forth in time between different scenes, between what she said, between what her husband said. There's all kinds of mumbled up thoughts in there. So of course this is completely fragmented, and it would signify to the Jacobean audience, as it does to us, that her mind has unravelled. She's gone completely mad. She's not able to hold on to the thread of reality anymore. Why has Shakespeare done this? It's to show us the consequences, the mental consequences of committing heinous crimes. Although she spent the entire play looking in public like she could hold it together and wasn't going to fall apart, as soon as she falls asleep, she does fall apart, and she reveals all, just as Macbeth had done. She reveals it without knowing it, but she reveals it. So she loses her mind, she gives away their secrets. My favourite line of hers is that great line,
"Here's the smell of the blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Oh, oh, oh."
She wants perfumes to sweeten her little hand. Notice the use of the adjective little there. It makes her sound weak, vulnerable. It's a kind of feminine word for Jacobeans, isn't it? And she's gone from this hard and strong woman to someone who's become much more vulnerable, much more weak, much more female to a Jacobean audience's mind. So she's really undergone this dramatic change. She also wants perfumes to sweeten her hand. That's quite a sort of feminine thing to desire as well, isn't it? The sweet smells of the perfumes. So there's this real sense that as the play has gone on, she started out strong, calling up the evil spirits, and she's become more and more disempowered, vulnerable, feminine. Compare the image there with what she said about wanting the perfumes of Arabia to sweeten her hand, and what Macbeth said after he committed the murder, and he looked at his hands which were covered in blood, and he said, "Will all great Neptune's oceans wash these hands clean? No. These will rather the multitudinous scenes incarnadine, turning the green one red." He was saying back then that his crime is going to stain the entire seas of the world. And here, Lady Macbeth wants all the perfumes of the world to sweeten her little hand. The images are connected. There's a sense of hyperbole about both of them. And in the case of both of them, they feel that it's impossible for their crime to be eradicated and for things to go back to a state of purity and innocence. So there are these brilliant parallels, aren't there, between him looking at his blood-stained hands immediately after the act of murder and her much, much later looking at her blood-stained in a hallucinatory way, hands, and wishing she could rub them clean. It's a real parallel between them, isn't it? Macbeth immediately had this sense of regret, remorse. Oh, why have I done this? Lady Macbeth suppressed it for most of the play, but it comes out in the end. And by creating this parallel between them through the hands, Shakespeare shows us very clearly his point that you can commit a crime of murder, but you're going to suffer for it at some point. At the end of the scene, we get the famous line,
"What's done cannot be undone."
that's a real sense of regret. It contrasts to what she said earlier when she was saying what's done is done and trying to get her husband over the crime. And it contrasts what Macbeth said back at the start about if it were done when 'tis done, then it were well 'twere done quickly, when he was thinking maybe there won't be any consequences. Here, the final comment about consequences is one of deep despair. What's done cannot be undone. That modal verb cannot emphasises the irrevocable nature of the crime they have committed. So Shakespeare is clearly showing us here through this scene and paralleling it very cleverly with that scene, Act 2, Scene 2, after the murder, that you can't commit a crime of murder and get away with it, at least not in your mind, and that eventually you will fall apart. It happened to Macbeth first. He almost fell apart when he looked at his hands. He got it together, he became more brutal. Then he hallucinated Banquo's ghost at the banquet and everybody realised that he'd done something terrible, even though he then went on to think about consolidating his power. But the mental breakdown, it happened. And Lady Macbeth, she was strong, she was purposeful, she was committed to their cause, she held it together in public for pretty much the entire play. But here, her crimes catch up with her in her sleep. She goes mad. In fact, this is the last time we see her in the play, the last words we hear from her. The next thing we know about her, she's committed suicide. So Shakespeare's message is incredibly clear through both of these characters. You can't commit the crime of murder and have no consequences in your mind. It will send you mad in the end.